The giant crystal hall stretched out like a frozen ocean. Thousands of alien beings filled the curved seats that rose up in circles around the center floor. Some floated in the air like glowing clouds. Others crawled on multiple legs across the smooth walls. A few looked almost human, but their skin was blue or silver or covered in scales. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the middle of it all. She felt very small. The speaking platform under her feet was made of the same crystal as everything else in this place. It was beautiful, but cold. Chen wore her best navy blue suit and carried a simple tablet with Earth's information. Around her, aliens whispered in languages that sounded like music or thunder or static electricity. "The human will speak now," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Chen looked up at the beings around her. She had studied them for months, learning their names and customs. The Zephyrians were the bright, floating lights that never stayed in one shape. They controlled energy like humans controlled fire. The Hive Queens looked like giant insects with jeweled crowns. They could talk to millions of their people at the same time with their minds. The most impressive were the Vorthan Elders. They sat in the highest seats looking down at everyone else. Their bodies were tall and thin, with skin like polished metal. They had been traveling between stars since before humans learned to make tools. "Honored council members," Chen began. Her voice carried clearly through the hall. "I come before you representing the people of Earth. We seek membership in this great alliance of worlds." A sound like wind chimes came from the Zephyrian section. Chen had learned this was their way of laughing. She continued anyway. "Humanity has achieved many things. We have split the atom and put that power to peaceful use. We have sent machines to other planets in our system. We have connected our entire world through communication networks." More sounds filled the hall. Clicking from the Hive Queens. A low hum from other species. The Vorthan Elders stayed silent, but their metal faces showed no emotion. Chen pulled up images on her tablet. The screen projected them into the air above, her head for everyone to see. "We have built cities that touch the clouds. We have cured diseases that once killed millions. We have created art and music and stories that inspire our people to be better." "How charming," said one of the Hive Queens. Her voice buzzed like 1,000 bees. "You have learned to make fire and paint on cave walls." The crystal hall filled with more alien laughter. Chen felt her cheeks burn, but she kept going. "We have also survived our own weapons," she said. 50 years ago, we had enough nuclear bombs to destroy our world many times over, but we chose not to use them. We learned to work together instead of fighting." This time the laughter was so loud that Chen had to wait for it to stop. A Zephyrian formed itself into something like a person and spoke. "You are proud that you didn't kill yourselves? How primitive." Chen showed more images. Hospitals where human doctors work to save lives. Schools where children from different countries learn together. Space stations where people from old enemy nations worked side by side. "We have differences," Chen admitted, "but we have learned that those differences make us stronger. We believe we can bring something valuable to this council." "And what might that be?" asked the lead Vorthan Elder. His voice was like metal scraping against stone. Chen took a deep breath. "Hope. The belief that any problem can be solved if people work together. The knowledge that peace is possible even after the worst conflicts." The silence that followed was worse than the laughter. Chen could feel the weight of thousands of alien eyes looking down at her. Finally, the Vorthan Elder spoke again. "You travel between worlds using chemical rockets. You communicate using radio waves. You solve disputes by talking. You think this primitive behavior has value to civilizations that have mastered space and time itself?" "Every species here has something to teach," Chen replied. "We ask only for the chance to learn and to share what we know." The Hive Queen leader stood up. Her wings spread wide, casting shadows across the floor. What you know? Child species, we were building worlds before your son was born. We have hive minds that span entire galaxies. What could you possibly teach us? Chen felt the moment slipping away, but she tried once more. We know how to hope when things seem impossible. We know how to keep trying when everyone says we will fail. We know how to find new ways to solve old problems. A Zephyrian flickered brighter. Hope? We control the energy of stars. We don't need hope. We have power. Power without wisdom is dangerous, Chen said quietly. The hall erupted. Aliens called out in dozens of languages, all angry. The Vorthon elders raised their hands, and silence fell like a hammer. Enough, the lead elder said. We have heard what this young species offers. Now we will vote. Chen knew it was over before. The voting began. Lights flashed across the hall as each species cast their decision. Red meant no, green meant yes. The hall filled with red light. The vote is complete, the elder announced. 0 in favor, all opposed. The application for membership is rejected. The elder looked down at Chen with something that might have been pity. Young human, your species shows some promise. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when you have learned to travel properly between stars. When you have grown beyond your petty conflicts, you may return. But today, you are simply not ready. Chen nodded slowly. She had expected this, but it still hurt. May I ask what we need to do to be worthy of this council? Evolve, the elder said simply. Stop being so human. As Chen walked toward the exit, the aliens continued talking among themselves. They had already forgotten about the small woman from the small planet who had dared to ask for acceptance. But Chen had not forgotten them. As she left the Crystal Hall, she was already making plans. They thought humanity was too primitive to matter. They thought humans were too weak to be a threat. They thought Earth could be safely ignored. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Outside the hall, Chen looked up at the stars through the station's clear dome. Somewhere out there was Earth, full of people who refused to give up when told they weren't good enough. People who found ways around every obstacle. People who turned their greatest weaknesses into their greatest strengths. The Galactic Council had just made the biggest mistake in their long history. They had underestimated humanity. Chen smiled as she walked toward her ship. The real work was about to begin. 3 months had passed since the rejection. Ambassador Chen should have returned to Earth by now, but her ship stayed docked at Nexus Prime. The trade moon orbited between 3 star systems, making it the perfect place for species from different worlds to meet and do business. Chen told Earth's government she was studying galactic culture to prepare for their next application. That was partly true, but she was really doing something much more dangerous. Nexus Prime was full of aliens that most council species ignored. The Scalari were short, gray-skinned people who fixed machines and never caused trouble. The Benthi were water breathers who lived in special tanks and sold rare minerals. The Corvin looked like walking trees and grew food in orbital gardens. These smaller species were friendly to Chen because she treated them like equals. She ate with them, learned their languages, and listened to their stories. Slowly, she began to understand things the Council didn't want anyone to know. The big species, they don't like competition, explained Zix, a Scalari mechanic. He was working on Chen's ship while they talked. Anytime little species get too smart, bad things happen. Chen handed him a tool. What kind of bad things? Zix's large eyes looked around to make sure no one was listening. My people, we almost invented new type of computer 20 years ago. Very fast, very powerful. Then Zephyrian energy beings came. They said our design was dangerous, made us destroy all the research. Did they give you a reason? They said it would interfere with their energy networks. But Corvin friend told me different story. Zix lowered his voice even more. Corvin almost developed way to make plants grow without light. Hive queens came and said their research was causing space diseases, made them stop. Chen felt cold, despite the warm air of the station. How many species has this happened to? All of us, said a new voice. A Benthy in a mobility suit rolled over to them. Her name was Gloob, and she sold crystals from deep ocean worlds. Every species that joins Council gets limits placed on what they can study. The Council calls it responsible development, Zix added. They say they protect us from dangerous technology. Gloob made a bubbling sound that was Benthy laughter, but it sounded bitter. They protect themselves from us getting strong enough to challenge them. Chen spent the next few weeks talking to dozens of smaller species. The story was always the same. Anytime a species developed something that could make them more powerful or independent, the major council powers found reasons to shut it down. The worst part was how clever they were about it. The Zephyrians never said, "Stop building better computers." Instead, they talked about energy stability and network security. The Hive Queens never said, "Don't develop new communication methods." They worried about mental contamination and psychic interference. Chen realized the council wasn't a partnership of equals. It was a system designed to keep the powerful species on top and everyone else dependent on them. But there was something else, she discovered. Something that made her heart race with excitement. Humanity had developed in complete isolation from galactic civilization. No Zephyrian had ever interfered with human computer development. No Hive Queen had stopped humans from creating communication networks. No Vorthan Elder had prevented humans from learning about time and space. This meant Earth had solved problems in ways that no other species had ever tried. Chen began testing her theory. She showed Zix some basic human computer designs. His eyes went wide. "This is impossible," he whispered. "You make the machines think in completely different way. Our computers try to copy Zephyrian energy patterns. Yours work like brains." She showed Gloob how humans had developed sonar technology by studying dolphins and bats. The Benthy were amazed. "We always try to make sound-seeing work like Hive Queen mind touch, but your way is much simpler, much better for water environments." The more she shared, the more excited the small species became. Human technology wasn't more advanced than council technology, but it was completely different. It had evolved to solve the same problems using totally different methods. "Your people think in ways that confuse the big species," Gloob explained during one of their secret meetings. "Zephyrians expect all computer technology to use energy manipulation. Yours uses something else entirely. They wouldn't even recognize it as advanced technology." Chen began to form a plan. It was risky and would take a long time to work, but it might be the only way to break the Council's control over galactic civilization. She started small. She gave Zix designs for human-style computers that would look like simple mechanical devices to any Zephyrian inspector. She showed the Corvin how to hide advanced growing systems inside what appeared to be basic farming equipment. "The key is not to look threatening," she explained to her growing group of allies. "The Council powers only stop technology they recognize as dangerous. If they don't understand what you're building, they'll ignore it." Within weeks, word was spreading through the small species communities. The humans had ways of doing things that the Council had never seen before. Better yet, these methods were specifically designed to avoid the Council's restrictions. A Corvin named Thisk came to Chen with an exciting report. "We tested your growing technique on my friend's food station. Crop output increased by 40%. Hive Queen Inspector came by yesterday and saw nothing suspicious." Chen smiled. "Good. Now teach it to 3 other stations, but tell them to be careful. Never increase production by more than small amounts at a time." The plan was working. Piece by piece, she was sharing human knowledge with species that had been held back by council control. But she was doing it in ways that would stay invisible to the major powers. Chen sent regular reports back to Earth, but she coded them carefully. To anyone reading her messages, she was just a diplomat collecting cultural information. But her real reports went to a small group of Earth scientists and engineers. "We need people out here," she wrote in one encrypted message. "Not diplomats or soldiers. We need teachers and mechanics and farmers. People who can blend in and share what we know without making it look important." The response came back within days. "Volunteers are being selected. They'll arrive as merchants and researchers. Give us 6 more months." As Chen looked out at the stars from her small quarters on Nexus Prime, she felt hope growing in her chest. The Council thought they had crushed humanity's dreams of joining galactic civilization. They thought Earth was too primitive to matter. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you don't take seriously. The real revolution was just beginning. Dr. James Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead as he carefully brushed dirt away from the crystal formation. To anyone watching, he looked like a typical human archaeologist, excited about finding old artifacts on the desert world of Keth Prime. "Fascinating," he said loudly, making sure the Zephyrian observer could hear him. "These crystal patterns show how the ancient Kethans stored information." The floating ball of energy that was the Zephyrian drifted closer. "Primitive data storage. We have studied these ruins before. Nothing of value remains." James nodded and smiled. "Of course, you're right. I just find historical technology interesting, even if it's completely obsolete." The Zephyrian flickered with boredom and floated away. James waited until it was gone, then carefully pulled out a small device and placed it against the crystal. The device was disguised to look like an ancient Kethan tool, but it was actually cutting-edge human technology. James wasn't really an archaeologist. He was a computer engineer, and he wasn't studying old Kethan data storage. He was installing a new communication network that would let the crystalline collective talk to each other without the Zephyrians listening in. The crystalline collective were silicon-based life forms that looked like living rock formations. The Zephyrians had been monitoring all their communications for decades, making sure they never developed anything that might challenge energy-being technology. But James had figured out something the Zephyrians missed. Crystal beings could communicate, using vibrations through solid matter. If you knew how to set up the right resonance patterns, you could send messages through the planet's crust itself. "Is it working?" asked Vel, a crystalline collective member who looked like a pile of glowing purple stones. James checked his readings. "Perfect. Your people can now talk to each other across the entire planet without sending any energy signals the Zephyrians I can detect." Vel's crystals pulsed with excitement. "This changes everything. For the first time in decades, we can coordinate our research without the energy beings knowing what we're studying." Meanwhile, on the ocean world of Aquatica, engineer, Maria Santos was having her own success. She stood on the deck of what looked like a simple mineral survey ship, but she was actually watching the first test of a revolutionary new technology. The water around the ship began to move in strange patterns. Slowly, a massive city rose from the depths. It was beautiful, with curved buildings that flowed like underwater plants. But the most amazing thing was that it was moving. "The mobile anchors are working perfectly," reported Captain Def, one of the aquatic depth dwellers. His gills fluttered with excitement. "Our entire city can now relocate in less than 6 hours." Maria grinned. "The Hive Queens will never be able to track your population centers now. By the time their scouts find where you used to be, you'll be halfway across the ocean." The depth dwellers had been stuck in fixed cities for centuries because the Hive Queens monitored all large-scale construction. But Maria had shown them how to build cities that moved like living things, using techniques humans had learned from studying whale migration patterns. "Your people think in such strange ways," Captain Def said admiringly. "We always tried to build stronger cities to resist the Hive Queen pressure. You taught us to build cities that escape from pressure entirely. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Kim was on the mountain world of Rockholm, showing the stone people called Lithians how to hide advanced manufacturing inside what looked like natural cave formations. The techniques came from human experience with camouflaged military bases. Engineer Tom Wright was on the forest moon of Verdania, teaching the plant-like Sylvans how to grow communication networks that looked like normal root systems. The Hive Queens had forbidden the Sylvans from developing any kind of planet-wide communication, but they never thought to monitor plant growth. Physicist Lisa Park was working with the Void Drifters, nomadic beings who lived in the empty spaces between star systems. She helped them develop better navigation systems using principles from human submarine warfare. Now they could move through space without leaving any trace that other species could follow. Each human specialist worked with different alien species, but they all followed the same basic strategy. Instead of trying to build technology that was more advanced than Council technology, they built technology that was invisible to Council understanding. The network grew slowly and carefully. Each success led to new contacts and new opportunities. Species that had been isolated for generations suddenly found they could talk to others who shared their problems. Chen coordinated everything from Nexus Prime. Her quarters had become an unofficial embassy for dozens of small species. Representatives came and went at all hours, sharing information and making plans. The Corvin food production is up 30% across 12 stations, reported Thisk during one of their secret meetings. The Hive Queens haven't noticed anything because it looks like normal seasonal variation. Gloob the Benthi added her own news. 3 more depth-dweller cities have gone mobile. The Hive Queens sent scouts to investigate reports of unusual ocean currents, but found nothing. Zix the Scalari was practically bouncing with excitement. The Crystal Communication Network now connects 47 worlds. The Zephyrians have no idea it exists because it doesn't use any energy signatures they recognize. Chen felt a warm feeling in her chest. The plan was working better than she had dared to hope. But she also knew they were approaching a dangerous point. We need to be more careful now, she warned her allies. As our network grows, there's more chance someone will notice patterns. The Council powers aren't stupid. If too many things change at once, they'll start investigating. Her warning proved to be wise. A week later, Vel sent an urgent message through the Crystal Network. Zephyrian inspection teams are visiting multiple worlds. They're asking questions about unusual technological development patterns. Chen called an emergency meeting of her core allies. They gathered in a cargo bay that Zix had modified to block all forms of electronic surveillance. The Council is getting suspicious, Chen said. We knew this would happen eventually. The question is, what do we do about it? We could slow down the network expansion, suggested Gloob. Make it harder for them to spot patterns. Chen shook her head. That won't work. Once they start looking, they'll find evidence eventually. We need a different approach. She looked around at her alien friends. 3 months ago, these beings had been isolated and powerless. Now they represented a growing alliance of species that was learning to work together in ways the Council had never seen. I think it's time to take the next step, Chen said. Instead of trying to stay hidden, we need to make ourselves impossible to stop. Zix tilted his large head. What do you mean? Chen smiled. I mean it's time to show the galaxy that there's an alternative to the Council's way of doing things. But first, I need to get a message to Earth. We're going to need more help. As her allies left the meeting, Chen stayed behind in the cargo bay. She activated a communication device that looked like a simple Benthi crystal reader, but was actually a quantum transmitter that could reach Earth instantly. Mission Control, this is Ambassador Chen, she said into the device. Phase 2 is complete. Request immediate authorization for Phase 3. The response came back within minutes. Authorization granted. Assets are already in motion. Estimated arrival in 30 days. Chen smiled as she shut off the transmitter. The Galactic Council had laughed at humanity's first petition for membership. They thought Earth's rejection would be the end of human involvement in galactic affairs. They were about to discover that it had only been the beginning. Elder Corvash stared at the holographic display floating above his desk. The temporal readings made no sense. According to the Vorthon time monitoring systems, the galactic development timeline was shifting in ways that should have been impossible. "Show me the crystalline collective projections again," he ordered his assistant. The hologram changed to show the silicon-based species' expected technological progress. For decades, the line had been perfectly flat. The Zephyrians had made sure of that by controlling all their communication and research capabilities. But now the line was rising. Slowly at first, then faster and faster. "When did this acceleration begin?" Corvash asked. "Approximately 4 months ago, Elder," the assistant replied. "It coincides with similar anomalies in 17 other minor species." Corvash felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: worry. The Vorthons had spent thousands of years perfecting their control over galactic development. Every species followed predictable patterns. Every technological advance happened according to their timeline, until now. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out in the headquarters of the other major powers. Zephyrian Central Command was a sphere of pure energy orbiting a neutron star. Inside, the collective consciousness of billions of energy beings was trying to understand how their monitoring systems had failed. "The communication blackouts are spreading," reported one of the Zephyrian commanders. 12 sectors now show gaps in our surveillance network." "That's impossible," replied another. "We monitor all energy-based communication in this galaxy. Nothing can hide from us." "Perhaps they're not using energy-based communication," suggested a third voice. The suggestion caused an uncomfortable silence. The Zephyrians had been energy beings for so long that they had forgotten other forms of communication were possible. Meanwhile, in the living ships of the Hive Queen fleet, millions of insectoid minds were sharing a growing alarm. The Queens could feel the edges of their mental network becoming fuzzy and uncertain. "Sectors 7 through 23 are no longer responding to deep scans," buzzed the primary queen. "Our client species appear to be absent." "Absent?" questioned a subordinate queen. "You mean they've been destroyed?" "No, their life signs remain strong, but their minds have become quiet, hidden, as if they have learned to think in ways we cannot hear." The investigation began immediately. Teams of inspectors from all 3 major powers spread out across the galaxy, looking for answers to the impossible changes happening around them, but wherever they looked, they found nothing suspicious. The minor species were still there, still following all the rules and restrictions placed on them. Their technology levels appeared unchanged. Their research projects all fell within approved parameters. Yet somehow, everything was different. A Zephyrian energy scout arrived at Keth Prime to investigate reports of unusual crystal resonances. They found Dr. James Rodriguez exactly where he was supposed to be, carefully cataloging ancient artifacts. "Any interesting discoveries?" the scout asked, its voice crackling like static. James held up a broken piece of crystal. "Nothing revolutionary, just trying to understand how the old Kethans stored their grocery lists." The scout scanned the area, with energy senses that could detect the smallest power source. Everything looked normal. The humans' equipment was primitive by galactic standards. The crystals were just crystals. The scout never thought to check for vibrations traveling through solid rock. On Aquatica, a Hive Queen inspector dove deep into the ocean, searching for the depth-dweller cities that had supposedly vanished. Her mental probes swept across the seafloor, looking for large concentrations of organized thought. She found nothing but empty ruins and confused fish. The inspector never realized that the cities had learned to move like migrating whales, following patterns that seemed random but were actually precisely coordinated. Similar failures happened across the galaxy. The Council's inspection teams were looking for the wrong things. They expected to find evidence of technology that challenged their supremacy. Instead, they found technology that ignored their supremacy entirely. After months of fruitless investigation, the three major powers called an emergency council session. "We have a problem," Elder Corvash announced to the assembled representatives. "Multiple minor species are showing signs of accelerated development, but we cannot determine how or why." The lead Zephyrian flickered with frustration. "Our energy sensors detect no unauthorized technology. Yet somehow, 17 different species have improved their capabilities beyond predicted parameters." The primary Hive Queen's mental voice buzzed with anger. "Worse, several client species have simply disappeared from our monitoring networks. Not destroyed, hidden." Murmurs filled the crystal hall as the assembled aliens discussed this unprecedented situation. In thousands of years of galactic history, nothing like this had ever happened. "There is one common factor," Corvash continued. "All the affected species have had recent contact with humans." The hall fell silent. Many of the assembled beings had forgotten about the primitive species that had been rejected from the council months ago. "Impossible," scoffed a Trilarian representative. "The humans were evaluated as completely harmless. Their technology is centuries behind our client species." "Nevertheless," Corvash replied grimly, "every investigation points to human involvement. We demand that Earth immediately recall all human agents and submit to council oversight." "And if they refuse?" asked the Zephyrian. Corvash's metal face showed no emotion, but his voice carried the weight of eons. "Then humanity will be declared a rogue species and dealt with accordingly." The message was sent to Earth through official diplomatic channels. It was a simple ultimatum: surrender all human agents within 30 galactic standard days, or face the full military might of the major council powers. But the response that came back wasn't from Earth's government. It wasn't even from Earth. The communication arrived at the council's central receiving station with a location tag that made every security expert check their systems twice. According to the signal analysis, the transmission was coming from inside the council chambers themselves. When the message played, Ambassador Chen's face appeared on every screen in the hall. "Honored council members," she said with a smile that held no warmth. "You wanted to know what happened to the missing human agents. You wanted to understand how the minor species had developed beyond your predictions." She paused, and for the first time in their long lives, the major powers felt something they thought they had forgotten: fear. "The truth is," Chen continued, "we never left. We've been here all along, living among the species you consider beneath your notice. Learning from them, teaching them, building something you never thought was possible." The transmission ended with coordinates for a meeting location and a simple message: "If you want answers, come and get them, but come prepared to learn that the galaxy has changed in ways you can't imagine." Elder Corvash looked around the hall at his fellow council members. For the first time in millennia, they had encountered something they didn't understand and couldn't control. The humans had just declared war on the established order of the galaxy, and somehow the council had the feeling they were already losing. The emergency council session had been called for the largest assembly hall in galactic history. Representatives from every major and minor species filled the vast space. The air hummed with tension and confusion. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Chen, but she was no longer alone. Behind her stood representatives from dozens of species the council barely remembered existed. Zix, the Scalari mechanic, was there, his gray skin gleaming under the crystal lights. Gloob the Benthi floated in her mobility suit, her tentacles moving in patterns of excitement. Captain Def of the Depth Dwellers wore a special breathing apparatus that let him survive in the station's air. But these weren't just random minor species representatives. As the council powers looked closer, they realized with growing horror that these beings represented entire civilizations. "Honored Council," Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "6 months ago, you rejected humanity's application for membership. You told us to evolve beyond our primitive nature. You said we should return when we had grown beyond tribal warfare and learned to travel properly between stars." She gestured to the beings around her. "We took your advice. We evolved, but not in the way you expected." Elder Corvash leaned forward in his high seat. "What is the meaning of this demonstration, human? Where are our missing client species? What have you done to them?" Chen smiled. "We didn't do anything to them. We did something with them. We showed them that there was another way to live besides under your control." The Zephyrian representative flickered with anger. "Impossible. We have monitored all technological development in this galaxy for millennia. No species can advance beyond our permitted parameters." "You're right," Chen replied. "No species can advance beyond your parameters using the methods you understand. But what if someone used completely different methods?" She nodded to Zix, who stepped forward, carrying a device that looked like a simple crystalline formation. "This is a communication array," Zix explained to the stunned council. "It can send messages instantly across the galaxy without using any energy signatures. It works through quantum vibration in solid matter, a method my people developed with human guidance." The Zephyrians flickered in confusion. "That's impossible. Communication requires energy transmission." "Only if you think like an energy being," Glub interjected. "But there are other ways to share information. The humans taught us to think beyond the limitations you placed on our research." Captain Def activated a holographic display showing images of mobile cities gliding through Aquatica's oceans. "Our cities can now relocate anywhere on our world within hours. The Hive Queens can no longer track or control our population centers, because we learned to move like living things instead of staying fixed like buildings." The primary Hive Queen's mental voice buzzed with disbelief. "This is impossible. We monitor all large-scale construction and movement patterns." "You monitor patterns you recognize," Captain Def replied. "The humans showed us how to use patterns you would never think to look for. Patterns based on whale migrations and bird flocks and other biological models that don't exist in hive mind thinking." More representatives stepped forward, each sharing examples of technologies that had been developing right under the council's nose. The Corvin had created agricultural systems that looked like natural forest growth, but produced 3 times more food. The Lithians had built manufacturing centers inside what appeared to be natural cave systems. The Sylvans had grown planet-wide communication networks that looked exactly like normal root systems. "How is this possible?" demanded the lead. Vorthan Elder. "Our temporal monitoring systems would have detected any significant technological development." Chen's smile grew wider. "Your monitoring systems detect development along paths you understand. You've been controlling galactic civilization for so long that you forgot there might be other ways to solve problems." She activated her own display, showing images from Earth. Cities built to work with nature instead of dominating it. Technology designed to enhance biological systems instead of replacing them. Transportation networks that followed organic patterns instead of rigid geometric designs. "Humanity developed in complete isolation from your influence," Chen continued. "We solved the same problems every species faces, but we did it our way. When your agents tried to limit other species' development, they only knew how to stop technologies that resembled their own." The truth was sinking in across the hall. The major powers had been so focused on preventing other species from challenging them directly that they had completely missed the development of alternatives to their entire approach. "But this is just the beginning," Chen said, and her tone became serious. "What you're seeing here isn't just improved technology. It's something much more dangerous to your way of thinking." She gestured around the hall. "Look at who stands with me. The Crystalline Collective, who you kept isolated because their silicon-based thinking was too different. The Depth Dwellers, who you monitored constantly because their fluid societies didn't match your rigid hierarchies, the Corvin, who you limited because their biological technology seemed primitive. The representatives around Chen stood straighter, and for the first time, the council saw them not as minor species to be managed, but as equals who had chosen to work together. These species didn't need your permission to advance, Chen continued. They needed freedom from your interference. And once they had that freedom, they accomplished things that none of your species thought possible. Elder Corvash's voice carried a hint of desperation. What do you want from us? What are your demands? We don't want anything from you, Chen replied. We don't need your permission, your approval, or your membership. We've built something better. She activated a final display that made every being in the hall gasp. It showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with thousands of connections between star systems, trade routes, communication networks, and alliance agreements that bypass the Council entirely. Welcome to the Galactic Liberation Network, Chen announced. An alliance of free species working together by choice instead of domination. We've been building it right under your noses for months. The map showed the true scope of what humanity had accomplished. Hundreds of species that the Council had barely noticed were now connected in a vast network of mutual cooperation. They shared technology freely, helped each other solve problems, and worked together as equals. This is impossible, the primary hive queen buzzed. You cannot coordinate this many species without central control. You can't, Chen agreed. But we can, because we learned something you forgot long ago. Sometimes the best way to lead is to teach others how to lead themselves. Zik stepped forward again. The network doesn't have rulers like the Council. We have coordinators and specialists and teachers. Everyone contributes what they can and receives what they need. And because we developed our technologies in ways you don't understand, Gloob added, you can't stop us even if you try. Our communication networks are invisible to your sensors. Our transportation methods don't follow patterns you recognize. Our alliance structures don't match any model in your databases. The council hall erupted in chaos. Representatives from the major powers demanded explanations, threatened military action, and argued about how to respond to this unprecedented situation. But Chen just stood calmly in the center of it all, surrounded by her allies from species the council had never taken seriously. Finally, Elder Corvash called for silence. When the hall was quiet, he looked down at Chen with something that might have been respect. What happens now, human? Do you expect us to simply accept the destruction of the galactic order we have maintained for millennia? Chen shrugged. You can accept it or not. It doesn't matter. The galaxy has already moved beyond your control. Species across the network are sharing knowledge, solving problems together, and building better lives for their people. They don't need your permission anymore. She looked around the hall at the assembled representatives. You have a choice. You can try to destroy what we've built, but you'll fail because you don't understand how it works. You can try to ignore us, but we'll keep growing because freedom is attractive to species that have been controlled for too long. Her voice became gentler, almost sad. Or you can learn to be part of something bigger than your own power. The network is open to everyone, even you, but you'd have to join as equals, not rulers. The silence that followed was deafening. The idea that the major powers might have to give up their control and work as equals with species they had dominated for eons was almost incomprehensible. Finally, Chen turned to leave, followed by her allies. As they walked toward the exit, she called back over her shoulder. You asked us to evolve beyond tribal warfare and petty conflicts. We did. We learned to work together instead of fighting for dominance. We learned to solve problems through cooperation instead of control. She paused at the doorway and looked back one last time. We learned to be better than you. As the representatives of the Liberation Network left the hall, the remaining council members sat in stunned silence. The galaxy had changed forever, and they hadn't even noticed it happening. Outside, Chen looked up at the stars through the station's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, hundreds of species were building a better,